I think we can just start from the panelist introduction. My name is Taiko Suzuki. I'm the partner of Nishimura Nasaki. We are the largest law firm in Japan, and I head the India desk of the firm. And I lived in India for 2 years on secondment, and it was a decade ago. So that's how I've been involved in India-Japan corridor. So I'm Raghu-san. I just did my introduction, and moving over to Jackie-san. So san is how Japanese call each other. It's just like in Hindi, G. So Jackie-san, over to you.
Thank you, Suzuki-san. Well, thanks everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. My name is Jackie Scanlon-Dias, and I'm a partner in Hogan Lovells' Tokyo office. I lead the corporate transactions practice there, and I am the global lead for manufacturing and industrials for Hogan Lovells. Hogan Lovells, some of you may or may not know, we are the 5th biggest law firm globally, offices in 50 cities. And we have been doing a lot of work these days between Japan and India. So an absolute pleasure to be invited today to speak about that particular topic. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manjari Chaudhary and currently General Counsel for Maruti Suzuki India Limited. A pleasure to be a part of any panel at Legal Era. I've been with Maruti for about 5.5 years. Prior to that, with General Electric for over 17 years, law firm, and before that, an academician teaching at the university. So it's been quite a journey. But a pleasure to be here today and to be discussing on the topic.
Hi, my name is C.V. Raghu. I've been an in-house counsel all through my career, 33 years. Worked in diverse industries, FMCG, banking, insurance, healthcare. Now, the last stint has been auto components. I am currently the group legal advisor for Motherson. We are one of the largest auto component manufacturers. That should suffice. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So today we're going to be covering basically 2 topics. So Japanese corporations doing business in India, and also Indian corporations doing business in Japan, and how, what are the difficulties and what are the challenges, what are the potentials in these 2 corridors. And first of all, Jackie-san, can you please explain what are the driving factors for Japanese corporations doing M&A investment into India?
Thank you, Suzuki-san. So that's a huge question. The driving factors for Japanese companies investing in India. I thought I'd break it down into 2 parts, actually. First of all, a couple of general comments on the trends driving Japan outbound M&A, because it is such a huge trend. There are a number of different political, social, and economic factors driving these trends. The first one of which is the aging population and the shrinking population. The population in Japan is dropping by somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people a year. So if companies even want to maintain existing revenue levels, they have to go overseas. Next is domestic market saturation. Japan's domestic market post the 80s has experienced a huge degree of growth, and many of the markets are now saturated, so companies are looking abroad. Thirdly, global competitiveness. Before the 80s, Japanese companies were over half of the world's 100 top companies by market cap. Now only Toyota sits in that group, and Japanese companies are looking to regain that global competitiveness. Technology and innovation. Japanese companies are admired for their technological feats and are looking to partner overseas to continue to grow in that area. Low interest rates. Interest rates in Japan were traditionally very low, still are, and companies had competitive advantage when they were using those funds to deploy on investments overseas. Actually, I used to borrow money in Japan and invest in houses in New Zealand. It was great. They've closed that now, if anyone else is thinking about it. But low cost of capital was very interesting. Geopolitical considerations, we're helping a number of our clients think about their manufacturing hubs, where they are doing business, and we're seeing them shift from current jurisdictions into places like India, into Southeast Asia, into Indonesia and Vietnam. And most importantly, I think, is resource allocation. Japan, unfortunately, is not blessed when it comes to natural resources. Particularly following Japan's triple disaster in March 2011, when Fukushima and other power plants were closed. This put extra pressure on that industry. So we're seeing a number of investments to secure energy supply, to secure, those 7 minerals that you need to make batteries. And a number of investments we're seeing are driven by that need to secure resources. So that's the general overlay. On specific, well, Japan's the 3rd largest economy in the world, and it's the 5th largest investor into India. And some of you may recall that Prime Minister Kishida came in March 2022 and committed Japanese companies to investing over $37 billion into India. So I think they will be moving from 5th higher up, maybe even to 4th going forward. From my perspective, the sectors that I'm seeing as most active, and this is generally from our practice, we have a strong India desk in Singapore and a huge amount of Japan outbound M&A into India. Number 1, automotive and mobility, and Raghu-san will talk about this more. 2, infrastructure development. We have some of the largest infrastructure companies in the world, MHI and others, interested in investing in India infrastructure. 3, manufacturing technology. Sony, Panasonic, Daikin, Hitachi are all very interested in India's technological expertise. Pharmaceutical and healthcare, with the growing middle classes in India and the need for better healthcare, Japanese companies are investing there. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, and a key one, energy and natural resources. Mitsubishi Corp, Sumitomo, JGC, Marubeni, all very famous names in energy and renewables in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie-san. Now over to Raghu-san. Can you also touch upon your corporations or Indian corporations' investment and their interest into Japan?
Japan has always been very enigmatic. Now, if you've been to Japan, that country will amaze you every time you step on the soil of Japan. I've had the privilege of visiting that place several times in my job. The interesting thing is that while Japan is the 3rd largest economy in the world, we are fast racing there. And as projections go very soon, India should be more or less in the same bracket as Japan. Now, but don't get into wrong comparisons. Japan is a small country. We are a large country. Still, we are trying to catch up. So there must be something great about Japan, right? The interest in why Japan should invest, they don't invest or they don't come into partnership for short term at all. Okay? They don't. They are. If you look at any of the Japanese investment, look at Suzuki. They are here. They have fought their battles with the government of India, but they have stayed on. We pride ourselves of a JV with Sumitomo. Exactly 40 years today. 1983 was our joint venture, and this is 2023. We have 12 joint ventures with Japanese companies, and recently we have acquired about 3 companies in Japan. So it's actually a culture which is so contagious that if you understand the culture, it's a very clean way of overall growth. It is not about tactical business in Japan. There are many, you do business, again, this is not disrespecting any other country. There are many countries where you can do joint ventures which are tactical in nature. Like today, seasonally, chips are down, you can do a joint venture with Taiwan and make some money, but that's not the way Japanese will work. Japanese will work if it is in long-term investment, and they bring tremendous value. Their decision making is very, very collective decision. It is not concentrated decision, unlike in many of the Indian promoter companies where the chairman decides. But in Japan, it is a collective view. That's why it takes time. You must have patience when you work with Japanese. You must understand the culture. And if in any discussion, if a Japanese is telling you, let me check with my boss and come back, or that means at that point in time, he's not saying yes, he's saying no. There are some cultural nuances that you have to understand. At that point, it is no, but if he has a change of view, he'll check with his boss and come back. So it's a way of learning, but once you learn it, it's such a pleasure to work with them. I can tell you I have done joint ventures with American companies, British companies, European companies. Once they agree on a particular principle and the principles are clearly laid out, then it's a smooth sailing. And that is why I would say that this partnership will continue to grow, and you'll see a lot more investments coming from Japan to India, and Indian companies who understand the culture will be able to invest in Japan. Unless, even Japanese company, unless you don't have a trust, the seller will not allow you to buy it unless they trust you. We face that. So these are some of the nuances, and I think the doors have just opened. It'll go miles to do business with Japan. Yeah.
Thank you, Raghu-san. So now over to Manjari-san. You've been with several multinational companies, and now with the Japanese corporation. Do you think that the India-Japan relationship is becoming closer and closer? And what do you think are the reasons for that?
Good question, Raghu-san. Yes, I've been with the Suzuki Group as Maruti Suzuki GC now for 5.5 years, and that's has been a good time to understand the India-Japanese relationships and how they get translated into when the two countries, the companies of two countries, do business with each other. There is no denying the fact that in the current political regime in India, with Modi-san being here, Prime Minister Modi, and then earlier Prime Minister Abe, and then now Prime Minister Kishida, there is a great sense of camaraderie, a great sense of fraternity and understanding between the individuals, the individual prime ministers. And I think that has paved a way for the industrial and the trade relationships and the investment relationships between the two countries to become that much better and open. So if you see that, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, popularly called SEPA, was signed between India and Japan in 2011. Prior to that, 2000, if you see, they were called, it was called the relationship between India and Japan was just a global investment relationship. In 2006, it got elevated to a strategic global investment relationship. In 2014, it became, after SEPA in 11, it became a special strategic global investment relationship. So you can see that as the relationships between the two countries at the political level continue to get strengthened and grow, you found that these bilateral treaties and trade agreements and are only ways of opening up investment between the two countries. So in that, if you see the SEPA agreement, there are There is a, easing of doing business. There are subsidies, there are incentives to be able to come and invest in India and vis-a-vis back in Japan. All of these things have substantially increased the investment of Japan in India, and to a certain degree, even my Indian companies going to invest in Japan. In India, you see traditionally the Japanese companies were investing highly in the automobile sector and the electrical appliances sector. And you just mentioned, Jackie-san, that we have the Hitachis of the world, the Daikens of the world. Then we have the Sonys and the Panasonics on the electrical side. And then, of course, not to miss Suzuki in automobiles, Toyota in automobiles, Honda, Nissan. These are, companies that have traditionally come and invested in it. And Raghu-san alluded to this a little earlier when we were talking about that the Japanese are known in the world for their manufacturing practices. They are very detailed, very minute. There could be other areas that you could have in the Americans. I've worked with an American company for long, and they are also great at manufacturing, but they bring so many other areas as well. The Japanese have perfected the art of manufacturing, and that's the reason why they have continued to grow in that area, and therefore the investments that you see, whether it is in India or other countries, in this context we're talking of India, you will find that in the manufacturing sector, immense investments. However, we see that as business requirements change, so does the need change. And therefore, you now see, just in July, there was a memorandum of cooperation signed between Japan and India on semiconductors. And how are we going to bring in semiconductors, innovation, research, talent around this into India? India is really, after this whole pandemic issue where semiconductors shortage hit the entire world, every country is looking to protect a supply chain on the semiconductor and chip manufacturing area. So India is opening up in a big way, inviting investments, and the Japanese companies are really taking their investments into India into the next level, as you can see, which is very evident from this particular memorandum that got signed. Even in infrastructure, our Patna Metro Rail Corporation, the whole project is done with investment from Japan. The Bombay-Delhi corridor, even in roads, was again with an investment in them. Your bullet trains, your Vande Bharat and others which will come up, I think are all examples of investments between the two nations. And the most important of this has been the relationships between the two countries. When you have good relationships, trade flourishes. Economies get a boost, industrial output becomes better, investments in the two countries become better, and therefore bilateral trade grows in a big way. We closed on the bilateral trade between India and Japan in the end of the last financial year, ended 23, at nearly about 22 billion US dollars. Though the import and the export that we do is relatively less as compared to what we import from Japan, is about 2% of the total imports that we have. And similarly for Japan, when they export, it's still less. So there's a room for growing and developing. But I think we are all headed in the right direction. And the two nations, there is a whole official development assistance program that Japan gives, whereby they give financial loans for investments into India. Then there is a JETRO, which is formed in India, where, the Japanese companies who invest in India, they have a platform for them to be supported at the Prime Minister's office level. So there are a lot of things. These in relationship building has led to not only better investments, but also ancillary support functions, whether it is in Japan or in India, to support the investments of either country in the other.
Thank you. So I think we're very positive about the growth and the potential of the India-Japan relationship. But I think today our panelists ready to share their experience and challenges, maybe personal challenges that they may have faced in this Japan-India relationship. So first, Jackie-san, as non-Indian and as non-Japanese, what do you think is the biggest challenges for Japanese investors coming to India?
Thank you, Suzuki-san. So I've been living and working in Japan for, I guess, about 16 years now, and have helped a number of Japanese companies with these types of outbound projects. And some of the challenges that we've seen specific to India I guess are those that you would expect. Infrastructure and logistics, including transportation, power supply, logistics, has been expressed as a challenge in order to get businesses up and running. Market entry has been challenging. You know, India is a very sophisticated market. Finding the right entry point has some difficulties. Hiring has been difficult. Of course, there is a very young, educated, dynamic, ambitious population. But sometimes our Japanese clients have found finding the right specialists a little challenging. The bureaucracy and the regulatory environment has been difficult. I've heard very positive things recently about the recent changes in the tax legislation becoming more predictable and easier to deal with, which is encouraging to hear. And I guess land acquisitions, I'm working on a number of automotive joint ventures here, manufacturing joint ventures, land issues are, of course, challenging. But I guess the major one, when I'm talking to my Japanese clients, because it's so different culturally, is bribery and corruption. Trying to understand how to do business in India that doesn't cause them problems elsewhere in the world with the UK Bribery Act or FCPA, as well as adhering to local customs, educating their staff, training, compliance. That is a real challenge. So it's been interesting to see the regulatory developments in India and the culture changing here. I think that is very welcome from our Japanese clients and makes it easier for them to do business in India.
Raghu-san, what about your experience?
Jackie, I think you identified all the pain points rightly, right? That's not only for Japanese companies, for Indian companies also we face the same problems. Having said that, I think it's important also to understand how India as a nation has been evolving. Pre-1990, we were way behind. We were not a liberalized nation. Post-1990, we started the path of liberalization. So what has happened is that we have suddenly come out with, first I'll tackle one by one in the sense, our land acquisition laws are archaic. States are taking their steps, center is taking their steps, so that is a process, work in progress process. So that's a challenge even if today, being an Indian, if I have to acquire some land, it's a nightmare to say. But things are moving, things are far better than what they used to be 10 years back, 15 years back. Now what I know some states like, whether it's Gujarat, the erstwhile Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, where government is acquiring land, cleaning up everything, and for a foreign multinational which wants to come, government is giving the land. So all the litigation is being handled at a government level and not necessarily passed on to that. So that's on the land. On the regulatory part, I think we have not evolved in a continuous manner, the evolution of regulations. We were at one level and suddenly we have jumped the thing and now we want regulations which are at the top end. So that gap, if you look at today, even the Securities Exchange regulations or any of them, every second day there are some regulations that are coming. And within 3 days you have 3 amendments to the regulations because somebody made it. So it is an evolving process. It will take time. Bribery, yes, it is a nightmare. And it is true about
many, many nations. You know, bribery is not something new to only India. It is prevalent around the world. The problem why Indian bribery gets more focused is that in India, the bribery is very petty. Okay? In other countries, the bribery is of a large scale. You know, at a premier level, there's some $5 billion exchange happens and the business goes through. And that is not perceived very badly as bribery. But in India, you go to that inspector and you want a file to be moved, you have to pay 200 rupees. And that's bribery. So when the petty bribery comes, it prevents the progress of the project. You know? But that's also getting sorted out in the sense that I've faced this kind of scenarios in various countries as well. You know, where people will not tell you anything. We were on an antitrust application, and our application, we had applied in 7 countries. We got 6 countries approval. In 1 country, we did not get it. And lo and behold, it was in Russia. That time, World Cup football was happening. The guy would not tell us anything, but he would not pass. You know, and we realized, and we did not pay. We waited for him, let the football match get over, and then we pushed and got it done. But the question I'm saying is that, yes, this is a reality. But I think more and more companies, more and more organizations are resisting bribery, and there people are looking at different ways of escalating the matter, getting things done. But yes, we will evolve. So, from 1990 to 2023, we've come some distance. I think we have a long way to go. Yeah.
But it must be difficult. I mean, Japanese are so used to stagnated economy and things doesn't change so much in Japan. So how, I mean, have you seen difficulties in navigating the Japanese, your counterpart in how, situations are so different in India? Things are evolving day by day.
Sorry, come again?
Oh, yeah. Have you seen any difficulties in having your Japanese counterpart understand how things are different in India?
Yes, it is important for us to educate. As I said, we have 12 joint ventures. You know, in fact, everyone is welcome. Anybody who comes to my office, you'll feel that you're actually walking into a Japanese company. You know, all Indian, except the faces look Indian, but the style of the uniforms, everything is Japanese, because you have to imbibe. There's so much to learn from the Japanese culture about doing business the right way. You know, if you are supposed to send an MIS on a particular date, it's known as a day 1 report. I'm sure you also must be having day 1 report, day 7 report. Day 1 report means day 1 report. It cannot be day 3 report. Secondly, it has to be timed.
Yeah.
If day 1 report has to reach at 6 o'clock in the morning, it has to be there by 6 o'clock. If it doesn't go there, hell will break loose. The next point of escalation goes right up to the chairman and to the leadership on the other side. So obviously the systems have been automated so well that they will go. The second thing, one thing you must learn when you're doing business with Japan is that if there's a question that is asked, don't faff around. Because if you faff around, you'll reply, again the same question will come back. You again reply, the same question will come back. The Japs will not leave you till the time you answer the question, what exactly it is. Because they understand. And they are a very polite race. They will not be abusive, but they will go on asking, thank you, Rusan, but can you please explain this one more time? They'll go on asking till the time they get the answer. So it's no point. That is transparency. That is how you have to be transparent, and that's how you have to build on it. And these realities, we have an industrial park in Chennai with Sojitz. Now, Sojitz has worked with us the full 9 yards of acquisition of land, how land acquisition laws happen, how miscreants will cause litigation. They know the whole story. Now they've understood. And business will also go on. So it's about, you have to handhold them, in your country the way they handled you in their country. They you know, again, I might be going a little overboard. They can be extraordinarily sociable. When you go to Japan, your Japanese counterparts will not leave you for a minute to anything uncertain. They will take care of you from the time you land at the airport till the time you take your flight back.
Right.
You know, and they will get your itinerary done so well.
Yeah.
And you sometimes wonder, how did he know that I needed half an hour break at this point in time? But they have calculated that as well.
Thank you. Manjari-san, what's your experience and cultural difference of Japanese organization?
Pretty much the same as what Jackie and Raghu talked about. I can only elaborate on a few things. Most of them are pretty true as what they've said. In my experience, and mine has been of 5.5 years of working as GC for Maruti Suzuki, I think it's very important to understand that your working becomes easier when you, and I was saying this to a partner of NOT, who was which is one of the largest law firms there, and he'd come to see me last week. He was here for the International Bar Association event, and he was he asked me a question which was very interesting, and we had a very good sort of discussion around it. And I'm glad he went back quite happy with some sort of thoughts that I'd shared with him. He said that his boss in Japan, who was earlier a Japanese, passed away because of some issue. And now he has a American boss. So it's a global firm, so there must be somebody who's come. And he says, we are having some integration issues. So, and he was genuinely asking me, knowing that I had worked in a American company for so long, so what are your thoughts around something like this? And my only answer to him was, I said, I can only talk from experience of working with a Japanese company. Having worked for the only other company I'd ever worked for in my life was an American company, nearly 18 years. So I actually grew up there. And when I came here, I had to unlearn and relearn again, because the whole way of working, see, it's important. In the beginning, it can hit you very hard because you get absolutely flapped that you're used to walking like this and everyone else is walking the other way. I mean, you keep second guessing yourself as to what you're doing right or wrong. But then soon, if you understand to appreciate the fact that whether it's a Japanese company or whether it could be an American or for that matter, any other nationality, a company for profit is looking to make profits. That is the main objective. How we go about doing it sometimes could be different. It doesn't necessarily make one way of doing it right and the other way of doing it wrong. It is just different. And you just need to understand the differences between people. Appreciate the differences, understand them, respect them, and try and find the areas of commonality where there could be no friction, and then you can get those out of the way and begin to address these. That's exactly, I think, how I went about doing it, trying to appreciate, because the American way of talking and functioning is very open, direct, and to a certain degree, the Japanese might find it very informal. Though it isn't, but they think it's informal, given that their whole culture is one of hierarchy and formality. So if you appreciate that nobody junior will speak when somebody senior is speaking, you cannot make your comment just like that. There's a way and system of working around it. So it's all about appreciating the differences, respecting them, and finding the areas of commonality, and going about doing that. And I've seen the Japanese take a very long time to trust you. Unlike, and it's for some of you who may be working with Japanese companies, I mean, you might find an American will hire you, do his due diligence, but once he hires you, he's going to give you his full backing and support and make sure that you succeed until and unless you give him a reason not to do so. A Japanese, on the contrary, would do his due diligence, and when he hires you, but he brings you in and then says, now you have to prove your trust to me. You have to earn my trust. So, and it could last into months, up to a year or more. and you got to prove yourself. But once you do that, then you earn the trust and they become extremely loyal about it, and they begin trusting you. They will never second guess you, and they will never get bothered by what you tell them. They will take that extremely seriously. Again, when you are talking with them, do not indulge in casual conversation. The Japanese does not understand that. When he's talking business with you, he comes prepared with what he wants to know, and he expects the same of you, that you should give him exactly what he's looking for. You can tell him after you've done that, let's go out for a glass of beer, and then we can have some casual conversation, and he'll love that. But when you're doing business, you can't be casual, which Indians sometimes can be. And it's just our style. We are not trying to be offensive, that's the way it is. I mean, timeliness is something that the Japanese will do really feel the pain when they come to India, because we believe that if you're walking in 5 to 10 minutes late, it's okay. Number one, we might make up and we might do a great job of the meeting or the outcomes of the meeting. But the very fact that we walked in 10 minutes late is something the Jap finds very discourteous.
We always remember.
They find that very discourteous. So it's not something that they would appreciate. Everybody logs into a call 5 minutes before. This morning, I had our management call and our MD was logged on to it 10 minutes before the call was to begin. He didn't say a word. He started saying, hello guys, should we start the call exactly at the dot of the hour? But he was logged on. So it's some things like this. For example, changing regulations. Like you mentioned, that Japan is a country where things don't change rapidly. They just don't.
Glacial pace.
Yes, they
Glacial.
don't. The laws don't change rapidly at all. It's something that's there. It's in India. You just blink and the law is changing these days. So it's that fast. So how does one keep up with that? So regulatory compliance or statutory compliance, as we call it, is a big concern for the Japanese in India when they come here, because for them, being non-compliant in their own country, that concept is not there. Everybody is expected to be compliant, and when there is a non-compliant, we do see, and there are occasions of those happening even in Japan, it becomes a matter of personal affront. There is a public apology for that. People have known to commit suicide because they couldn't take the fact that there was a public reprimand or a disgrace, a feeling of disgrace. So compliance and changing regulatory scenarios for all those who work with Japanese companies, they need their focus on that. And if you are working with them, it's important to ensure that they appreciate and understand that what kind of systems do you have to deal with that, how are you dealing with it, because that they know is going to derail the whole business of the company. So that's an important thing. As far as red tapeism, bureaucracy is concerned, it may not, like Raghu-san said, we're talking of bribery at the top level. It's there everywhere in the world. So everyone, and I think the Japanese also appreciate and understand it. But at the lower level, like you're going somewhere and it's getting stuck and, inordinate amount of time is being taken to get something done. I think that is another area that bothers them and, makes them feel uneasy. And lastly, they come very, very prepared. So if you are looking at a particular regulation or you're trying to give them an opinion, I can assure you they would have already taken that opinion from 3 other people and would have understood it, but will come to you and talk to you as if they're only looking for your opinion, but they will go back and cross-check it. That is not because they are undermining your expertise. It's just that they like to make sure that there is no room for error before they try and come in to do business. So these are some differences of ways of working, which I think if either side appreciates, it helps to pave way for a smoother relationship.
Thank you. I think...
Just one last point,
yes, please.
just to add. My boss always says, when a Japanese writes a letter to you, don't read what he has written or she has written. Try to read why he has written that. So that summarizes, because you have to go behind, and because what has compelled him to write what he has written.
One comment from me, I think the trust, Manjari-san, that you mentioned is just crucial. And just one point, I have had the absolute pleasure of working with Raghu-san and his team at Motherson for the last year and a half on their acquisition of Yachiyo, a listed subsidiary of Honda, a huge transaction in Japan. When you think about trust, don't just think about trust with your counterparty. Think about all the other Japanese companies watching you, seeing how you perform in the market, see if you are a reliable supplier. So that trust element is much wider than you think, and one of the most important bits about doing business in Japan. Thank you.
We are on the watch list in Japan.
Okay, I have 1 minute left. Maybe I can take up one question. Anyone?
Hi, this is Abhishek Kanoy, General Counsel for PDS Limited. My question is to Ms. Chaudhary. Ma'am, I would like to ask you one question that, what are the 5 important business techniques being used by Japanese while dealing with the corporate in India with so much regulatory changes going on day-to-day basis in the regime, and how we try to resonate ourselves with those business techniques to have a, harmonious, collaborative business partnership together?
Okay, now let me try and answer, and of course, Raghu can add to it. But the techniques, I think the first is when they walk into a country where they are coming to invest, they do a very detailed due diligence. They are absolutely up to speed on any and everything. Then they also use the government channels very well. They have their own desk in Japan, which corresponds with the desk here, and which helps to pave way. They have their own system set up very well, which give them a huge amount of information knowledge. Also, companies who are already doing business, Japanese companies in India, always go out and support. There's a great feeling of fraternity. So you will find them that they are giving them, guidance and support and everything of that kind. So that's one. The other is that they appreciate and do a big understanding on exactly what would be the business requirements, what would be the challenges that could come up in that, do a very, very detailed understanding of that, and begin to find the right kind of solutions for it, be it manpower, be it the regulatory, quick dynamic regulatory framework, be it the bureaucracy in that relevant country, etc., all of that. Third, while dealing with people, they do not jump to conclusions very quickly. So when you're working with them, they will judge you, they will give you time and to understand, to figure you out, and then take their time to understand. Once they do, then they know and pick the people that they think they can trust, and then they give them the right kind of empowerment, and then they get to do their business. And lastly, I think they use political diplomacy very well as well. So I think as and when necessary and required.